The cameras leave first, then the tear gas settles. Then the building goes quiet, in a way it never is on a normal day. Inside, the prison is still flooded, burned, and covered in blood, sewage, and shattered glass. And somebody has to clean it up. You'd think the state would immediately call in a professional cleaning crew or a specialized hazmat team to sweep the place up. They don't. The floor stays covered in wreckage for days. Nobody touches a single thing. Not yet. Because the moment someone picks up a broom, they risk destroying a crime scene. Before anyone can even think about cleaning, the prison goes into what investigators call a forensic freeze. The entire building stops dead. The loud chaos of the riot is replaced by the constant, low buzz of the emergency lights. A riot doesn't create one giant crime scene, it creates hundreds of them. State police detectives and crime scene photographers move in first. Every homemade knife lying on the concrete gets a plastic evidence marker with its own number. Broken locks are photographed, damaged doors are measured, bloodstains are mapped before anyone is allowed to wipe them away. After the New Mexico Penitentiary riot in 1980, investigators spent days documenting where everything was before a single piece of evidence was moved. The garbage stayed where it was. The water rotted. Nobody swept until the detectives were finished. While investigators document the damage, the guards are busy with something else entirely. Tools. Every screwdriver, every pair of pliers, every single piece of metal from the maintenance shop has to be accounted for before cleanup begins. One missing tool stops everything. A missing screwdriver isn't just a missing tool. Inside a prison, it's a hidden weapon until somebody finds it. Nobody starts cleaning until every piece of metal is accounted for. Once investigators pack up, the prison has a new problem. A corporate cleaning company can't come in. Letting outside contractors into a high-security facility that just experienced a riot creates risks nobody wants to manage. So, who actually cleans it up? At many facilities, the answer is a combination of maintenance workers, exhausted correctional officers, and, something most people never expect, selected inmates. In some correctional systems, they rely heavily on what are known as orderly crews. These are lower-risk prisoners who stayed out of the riot. Guards pull them from their cells. Heavy rubber gloves, big trash bags. They're told to get to work sweeping the same hallways where the fight just happened. But before they ever reach the housing unit, they're searched. Every person, every bag, every tool. And they don't receive standard cleaning equipment. A wooden broom handle can be snapped into a spear in seconds. A metal mop handle can become a club. Even parts from a mop bucket can be turned into weapons. That's why many correctional systems now purchase specialized high-security cleaning tools. Fiberglass handles are much harder to break apart. Some tools are designed with fewer removable metal parts. After Nebraska's Tecumseh riot in 2015, officials even purchased weapon-resistant mops and brooms as part of the recovery effort. That line item alone tells you something about what the cleanup actually looks like on the ground. The first things the cleanup crews find usually aren't weapons. It's paperwork, thousands of pages of it. Court files soaked through, medical records stuck together, legal mail floating across the floor. When an office area or cell block gets torn apart, losing those papers creates a completely separate mess. Every piece of damaged legal paperwork has to be saved, verified, and remade so the prison's legal system doesn't completely fall apart. Prescription medications that were destroyed or stolen during the riot have to be tracked down and reissued under strict rules to stop people from overdosing on the yard. But as the walls, air vents, and pipes are ripped open for repairs, guards often uncover years of hidden secrets. Contraband that was stashed deep inside the building, hidden knives, cell phones, and drugs, suddenly turns up during the teardown phase. Every single damaged cell has to be completely searched and cleared a second time before anyone can ever move back in. And then there is the mental toll of what you're picking up. A riot completely destroys any idea of personal property. The cleanup crews end up shoveling massive piles of wet ash out of the cells. Inside the ash are the pieces of people's lives, torn letters, burned books, photos that were ripped off walls and shredded on the floor, everything an inmate owned mixed together in one pile. Nobody knows whose is whose. It all goes into black trash bags. The institution starts over with a clean slate. The people living in it don't get the same option. Putting a prison back together can easily cost millions of dollars from just one afternoon of chaos. When Attica went up in 1971, it caused over $3 million in structural damage, which means tens of millions in today's money. People assume the biggest expenses are just new paint and drywall. It isn't. The real budget killers are the building's infrastructure and security systems. Control booths with thick, multi-layered bulletproof glass have to be completely rebuilt from scratch. Digital locks and fire alarm networks that were melted down have to be entirely rewired. And then there is the air system. Prisons are sealed, closed-air environments. When inmates set fire to foam mattresses and plastic bins, the ventilation system acts like a vacuum. It sucks a highly toxic mix of melted plastic, chemical fire foam, and tear gas deep into the air ducts. Cleaning out miles of secure steel air systems often becomes one of the most tedious and expensive parts of the whole project. While those specialized industrial crews work behind thick plastic sheets, the rest of the prison deals with the human consequences of the damage. One destroyed housing unit means hundreds of inmates have to sleep somewhere else. Facilities are often forced to triple bunk inmates, cramming 3 men into tiny 2-man cells in the undamaged sections of the prison. Men who were bitter enemies 2 days ago are suddenly forced to sleep inches apart on plastic floor mats while construction crews drill in the background. Weeks later, the walls look clean. The new steel doors slide into place. Fresh paint covers the burned concrete, but something stays. Former staff describe it years after leaving the job. A specific smell: wet concrete, raw sewage, burned foam, tear gas baked into the insulation. It doesn't leave with the cleaning crews. It stays in the vents and the walls long after the building looks finished. Eventually, the maintenance logs get signed. By Monday morning, breakfast trays slide through the slots like nothing happened. A transport bus arrives. A new inmate steps onto the tier. The walls are freshly painted. The floors are clean. He doesn't know what happened in that hallway a few weeks earlier. He just sees a prison. Everyone else sees a crime scene that got scrubbed away. I will see you in next video.